Boss Motors in the tiny town of Marysville, Kansas, owned by this man, Greg Boss. His family's had this Ford dealership for 80 years. 2018, September, they host a very special event, the Boss Nationals, where well over 100 Boss cars would show up for the weekend. The showroom was a beehive of activity with registration going on Friday, September 7th. And in the back of the shop, where we walked past owners readying their cars for the Nationals, was a very, very special barn find. When Randy Saba, a collector from Pine, Colorado, would show everybody his treasure. The odometer reading of 198 reminded me of a barn find I had done for my Rare Finds column. Must have been 10 years previous. I checked later and the date was more like 2009. The car appeared in my Rare Finds column and in my Rare Finds book. In Chapter 7, a time capsule comes out of hiding and subtitled 1969 Boss 302 with 196 miles. There it was.
When you pull the cover off this car and people see it for the first time, they absolutely can't believe it. This paint has no touch-up. This is the original paint, original graphics. My name is Randy Saba, and I'm from Pine, Colorado. Right here we have a 1969 Boss 302 drag car with 198 actual miles. The car was in storage for 38 years in Houston, Texas, and it was pulled out in 2008 when the family decided to sell the car, and they advertised it through a broker, and the car was sold to a good friend of mine that lives in Illinois. Since then, the car was sold to a gentleman in Michigan who was a client of my buddy's, and the car was returned last November, and I had the opportunity, my wife and I had the opportunity to purchase the car.
I mean, that interior is amazing.
Yeah, the interior on this car, it still has the plastic on the seat belts in the back seat, and the carpet is, I mean, when I say original, there's been nothing replaced on the interior except the shifter, which was done for drag racing purposes.
Yeah, and you look at the car, I mean, the paint's original. You left the lettering on there that the man, that tells the story. The man actually, he bought it to drag race, built it, and then died. What exactly was that?
Well, Robert Justice was the name of the individual that purchased the car, and I have all the bill of sale documentation of when he ordered the car through Von Will Ford in Wharton, Texas. Wharton, Texas is a small town outside of Houston. The car was ordered for drag racing, to the best of my knowledge. There was very minor modifications done by the dealership, and once the car was set up, the family had indicated it was raced 3 times, and I do not know how Robert Justice's passing came about, but he died within the first year, it appears, of ownership, because the plates on the car are the original plates that are on the title to this car from 1969. So the modifications to the car are, it has a high performance cam that was installed in the motor, which is very easily done. It had all the smog equipment taken out of the engine. It had the rev limiter removed from the engine. It had headers installed. The headers were not connected to the exhaust. In the class that this car ran in, the exhaust had to remain on the car, but did not have to be connected to the motor.
So this thing is like a time capsule of a drag car back then, and I think you've done well to leave it the way it is.
Yes, my opinion is to preserve the history and the integrity of what this car was, and a few other modifications were the M&H drag slicks that are on the back of the car, the small skinny Goodyear tires on the front. It also has Gabriel Hijacker air shocks, traction bars, and a different gear ratio in the rear axle. It has 514 rear axle gears in it.
So what's your plan? What are you going to do with it? Just display it or what?
Yes, my plan is we have several other Mustangs that we like to take to shows. This by far is our specialty car. We want to display it. We want to show people this car. This car has only been out to one other show, and that was in Pebble Beach. So most of the world doesn't know about this car. And this is a special automobile that comes around once in a lifetime.
Okay, now Earl's going to drive us down the streets of this tiny town of Marysville where the Pony Express once was. And a little magic's going to happen. We're going to go back in time 9 years to March 13th, 2009, when Dick Jones, who people call DJ, a man from New Zealand living in the States, called and told me about this 69 Boss 02 he had found with 196 miles. The car was in Houston. DJ liked cars so much, he saved a 62 Chrysler Imperial, which led him to the Boss. It's a really interesting story from a car person, so give a listen.
A friend of mine called me from Houston. Well, she was an auctioneer, and her name was Judy McClellan. Said, look, Dick, there's this old car at an auction I'm having, and you need to buy it. And I said, well, what is it? She said, it's a 62 Imperial. So I Googled it, and I found out about the car, and I thought, wow, gee, it's not me. But the weirdest looking thing, I'd never seen one before. They never got to our part of the world. Anyway, long story short, I went down to Houston, looked at the car, and while I was looking at it, there were some young guys there, and they were talking about cutting it up as an art car. And the more I looked at this thing with that incredible dash and the rear reflectors and everything and that rectangular pink wheel, I thought, this is a piece of art. I'm not going to let them cut it up. So I went inside and I said, Judy, what would he take for it? She said, $2.5 grand. I said, I got $1,500. I don't want those guys to cut it up. So she called the guy. He said, I'll meet you halfway, $2,000. So I bought this car that I didn't really want to save it, thinking that it would go to enthusiasts. Well, I go to pick it up, and the son, it's a deceased estate, the son-in-law is there, Larry Justice, and we just get talking, and he said, what do you do? And I told him, what I've just told you. And he said, I've got a car, he said, that might interest you. He says, really unique. I said, what is it? He said, it's a 1969 Boss 302. And I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, they're fairly unique. I said, what color is it? He said, it's Acapulco blue. I said, so's mine. He said, you got one? I said, yeah, I do. He said, oh, okay. So I turned around to walk back to the wrecker, and as I'm walking away, he said, but mine's really unique. I said, why is that? He said, it's done 297 miles. And I stopped and I turned around and I said, beg your pardon? He said, it's done 297. He said, well, I think it is. He said, it's under 300 anyway. I said, okay. He said, do you want to buy it? And I looked at him and I knew he was a friend of the auctioneers, and I said, I don't think I can afford to buy it. He said, why? What's it worth? And I told him what I thought it was worth. And he said, good Lord. And he said, it's just sitting there. Do you want to sell it for us? I said, yeah, I would. So he said, I'll give you a call. Well, he called me about a week later. He said, Dick, I made a mistake about the mileage. And I thought, oh, here we go. He said, it's not 297, it's 196. I said, how did this happen? He said, well, Dad bought it. He drag raced it. Bob Justice. And I think you can see his name on the side of the car. He said he dragged it 4 or 5 times, and he said, and he got very ill and he died. And he said, my mother just shut the garage door and left it there. Well, I went round to look at it, and I don't know if I've sent you those shots. It's covered in cardboard boxes.
Yeah, I think I got those.
Okay, well, we moved one side of them away, and I slid down the side, and I got inside this thing, and the door went clunk, and I thought, Christ, I don't believe this. So I got a flashlight, and sure enough, 196. And he had all the paperwork. He had timing slips. So I took it back to the workshop here, very, very carefully washed it. I didn't do anything else to it. I took it to Classy Chassis to display it at the Reliance Center at Houston, that annual show they have.
Sitting there all those years, I mean, did it deteriorate pretty bad, though?
No, not at all. It was absolutely amazing. Before I went to see it, I thought, well, I said to Larry, look, I'm talking a fairly large number here, but it depends what condition it's in. I said, I've seen them where rats have eaten all the wiring, Houston humidity. Pleasant surprise, this guy who died had a big air conditioning business, and the garage, although it looks a bloody mess, was actually air conditioned.